The seeds of the investigation were planted 100 years ago. When François Derchon went out hunting that morning on his private estate of La Roche Cotard, he couldn't have imagined what was about to happen. Deep in the heart of the estate, his dog suddenly ran into a crack in the rocks. When the dog didn't come out, he tried to enlarge what seemed to be an entrance to some sort of den. That's when he discovered a cave. A natural cavity, more than 40 meters long, carved out of the soft tuffeau stone. It was composed of several rooms, some of which could only be accessed by crawling through narrow passageways. But at the time, he didn't realize the importance of his discovery. Once again, the cave fell into oblivion. Some 6 years later, a young prehistorian named Jean-Claude Marquet read about the existence of this cave in an old journal. No one had studied it yet. Intrigued, he sought out and obtained permission to go inside. Suddenly, one element caught his eye. The walls of the cavity were adorned with surprising engravings. He quickly realized that it was probably a prehistoric cave, but very different from the more famous caves, like those in Lascaux. However, being in the very early stages of his career, he didn't have the means to launch a real study. So he had the entrance sealed off and promised himself he'd come back as soon as he could. In the end, Jean-Claude Marquet would have to wait 50 years before achieving his dream. He became a museum director at a young age, and his career kept him away from La Roche Cotard. But he never forgot his promise to himself. Today, he has finally returned, and he's determined to lead the investigation that's been on his mind for so long.
As we move forward, you'll see some very intriguing things.
He's put together a multidisciplinary team to try to lift the veil on the mysterious traces he discovered.
Here we have a very interesting panel, a triangular one. The base of the triangle is at the top. And all over this triangle, nearly over the entire surface, we have parallel lines. It's very curious, this panel. Very curious indeed.
Triangular. Rectangular. Or wavy. Jean-Claude has identified a total of 5 engraved panels, spaced out at regular intervals all along the wall of this room. And in another part of the cave, there's a different-looking panel decorated with diamond patterns. He feels that these panels date back to the prehistoric era. To confirm his hypothesis and conduct a thorough investigation, he decides to put together a team of experts composed of some of the world's most famous prehistorians, such as Professor Jacques Joubert from the University of Bordeaux.
When we visit a new site like this, the first thing we have to do is make sure it's authentic. It's a bit of a Pavlovian response for prehistorians. We're always afraid that what we're looking at might be fake or the result of natural causes. So we have to make sure these lines are of human origin, that they're what we call anthropic, and were really made by humans, not animals such as bears, or simply created by natural causes. Geology can be very wily at times. It has fooled many a prehistorian. So the first thing we do is make sure the traces were actually created by humans.
This mission has been entrusted to Jean-Baptiste Fauvel, one of the members of the research team and an expert in traces left by animals on cave walls. He starts by studying the panel that seems to show a series of diamonds.
We suppose, based on everything that's been found in this cave, that these traces were made by bears. It's pretty common. Cave bears hibernated deep inside caves in karstic regions, and they regularly scratch the walls with their claws. We're very familiar with the kinds of vertical traces that 5 claws would leave on the wall. Sometimes you get a succession of lines that intersect with one another, creating geometric shapes like the diamonds we have here.
This panel was not made by humans. On the others, however, Jean-Baptiste Fauvel doesn't recognize the traces of bears or any other animal. Could they have been made by humans? To find out, Jean-Claude Marquette asked prehistorian Dorota Wojciech, the head of one of the biggest traceology labs in Europe, to join his team of experts. She has studied each of these panels meticulously, and she's confident in her conclusion.
From a traceological perspective, if we compare the claw marks with these traces, the depth and the shape of the traces is different. This means we can fully rule out that they were made by cave bears or any other species of animal. They're too organized, too symmetrical, too regular. Traces like these require a certain cognitive capacity, choosing the spot, using the light, and then deciding on an interval. Not too strong, not too weak, so they'd be visible but not too big. There are many different elements that attest to a certain level of organization, so they must be man-made.
Dorota Wojciech presented her conclusions to the other experts on site for validation.
I remember there were 4 or 5 of us there. And as experts, we often tend to hang back and wait for one of the others to voice their opinion. But it didn't take long for us to agree that the traces had been made by humans.
As a scientist and traceologist, I immediately started thinking about how they had been made.
Understanding how these traces were created is crucial for the team of prehistorians, because it could help them discover who made them. A few kilometers from La Roche Cotard, in another troglodyte cave with 2 full walls, Jean-Claude Marquette and Dorota Wojciech have launched an unprecedented experiment.
We might as well start with panel number 2 instead of number 1.
We just have to wait for the photogrammetry. And we have to time it too. Yes, of course.
They've asked a team of archaeologists to reproduce these traces using prehistoric tools, such as wooden spikes and flint arrowheads.
Mit 3 Fingern, wie du das hältst. Du hältst mit 3 Fingern.
Or even their fingertips.
Striche.
Wir gucken und
Von oben nach unten,
Ja.
wie haben wir
Ja,
gestern
genau.
abgesprochen. Hm? So, noch einmal, dass Claudio kann ein Foto.
The results of this experiment speak for themselves.
We're almost positive that they were done using fingers because the walls are so fragile that simply touching them leaves a mark.
When we used a finger, we got exactly the same types of lines shaped like a U. So, these are finger traces.
Prehistorians see these digital traces carved into the cave walls as a form of abstract art. Art is currently estimated to have appeared around 30,000 years ago. That was when the Homo Sapiens, our ancestors, started painting large, figurative frescoes representing animals. But they also made abstract art with their fingers. Could the traces in La Roche Cotard have been made by Homo sapiens as well? There's only one way to find out: by trying to date them. Two prehistorians have agreed to take on the challenge. Eric Robert, a researcher at the Museum of Man in Paris, and Guillaume Guérand from the CNRS, who specializes in the dating of archaeological sites.
When they called me to ask if I would help out in the study, I was very enthusiastic and intrigued. I definitely wanted to take part in the research, but at the same time, I was kind of skeptical, because we don't really know how to date traces on cave walls.
We don't really have a good way of dating works found inside caves directly, which is unfortunate. If the drawings are done using charcoal, for example, that's ideal. We can use carbon-14 to date them, but that's not the case here.
Guillaume Guérand has an idea of how to work around this problem. When the cave was discovered in 1912, it was obstructed. But how long had it been that way? That's what Guillaume Guérand wants to determine, because he believes this information could be an essential clue in understanding who may have left these traces.
There are certain things about La Roche Cotard that are in our favor, because it's like a sort of time capsule. Over the course of this cave's history, it was closed off for a long time. We know the Loire River left a lot of alluvions along the cliff out of which this cave is carved. In addition to that, there's sediment that has fallen from the plateau. So we actually have two sources of sediment that sealed off the cave's entrance. That means that the traces must have been made when the cave was accessible, before it was closed off. So our goal is to determine when the closing happened.
To that end, Guillaume Guérand is preparing to use a cutting-edge technique.
There's a method of dating that was developed recently called OSL, and it can be used to date the exposure of rocks to daylight. More precisely, we can measure the time that has passed since the last time it was exposed to daylight, which means just before the cave entrance was sealed off and obstructed. We're going to head out into the field to try to figure out when the cave was sealed off.
You see? But we could say, if we wanted to sample something, this one is fine. Okay, so that would be perfect. That would actually.
This process of dating is a crucial step in the prehistorians' investigation. But it is also particularly delicate, because this is the first time the OSL technique will be used inside a cave.
We only
This is the tougher.
where's
shirt. Yeah.
and then we tried this bit there.
Yeah. Where's that though?
We don't think we have something in the middle.
Took samples in there.
Yes, but it is also soft 34.
Ah,
Same.
okay. Yeah.
It is the same and the same high.
Two Danish physicists who specialize in OSL have offered to help.
All of this is rocks, but I think if we want sediment, we can go up here. When we should just clear a section.
The advantage here is that we have a single question, which is to know when the cave stopped being accessible to man. We can't accept results in the form of maybe yes or maybe no. We have one simple question, and we need one simple answer.
First, they must take samples from the upper part of the entrance. This is where humans could have slipped in before the cave was completely sealed off. The rays of sunlight came through this opening and illuminated the wall. According to the Danish physicists, certain minerals contained in these walls, namely quartz and feldspar, are sensitive to light up to several centimeters deep. Over an extended period of time of several millennia, the sun's rays are able to penetrate into soft walls like these. The moment when the wall ceased to be illuminated would have been recorded by these minerals, and we may still be able to find evidence of that today. What the physicists are interested in are hence these minerals, because that's what will help them determine when the cave was closed off. This means the researchers must take samples from the rock going several centimeters deep.
How thick do you want the sample to be, Trina? Do you have an idea? Is it a matter of millimeters or centimeters? How thick do you want the...
I would like at least 3 centimeters.
Okay.
The researchers believe this is the only technique suited for this context. Unlike radiocarbon dating, which is more commonly used in archaeology.
C14, that's a lovely technique, and it's a very good dating technique for many purposes. C14 hinges on you need biological material. You need something that was once alive and then died. It basically, it measures the ratio between the stable carbon-12 and the unstable carbon-14. So you need biological material, and as we all know, that sometimes have a tendency of disappearing. It's not necessarily preserved. The advantage of OSL is that we can go anywhere. We just need sand, basically. Quartz or feldspar, we can basically apply it anywhere in the world in any situation. And there is an age limit on C14. But we usually say that around 45,000 is where C14 runs out of steam. You can't use it anymore. Our age range is, depending on the site, we usually say we could go back 150,000 years if we use quartz. And then we have another material, which we like a lot, which is feldspar, which is somewhat more complicated. And here we usually say we can go back to about 500,000 years.
They take about a dozen samples.
So this one is 06, Trine?
Inside and then outside. And these two are these two.
A few weeks from now, the physicists will date these fragments at their lab in Denmark. This process may confirm what Jean-Claude Marquette suspects. He believes the cave was sealed off a very long time ago. While digging at the cave entrance, he discovered these archaeological materials. These are believed to be tools characteristic of a specific period in prehistory. At least, that's what concluded Dorte Wojciech upon analyzing them.
What we're looking at here is a carved tool that shows us all the usual traces of a tool that was carved by humans. This tool would have been used to scrape and work animal hides.
But what interests Dorte Wojciech the most is that this tool presents certain highly specific characteristics that she can interpret using experimental archaeology. She tried to reproduce this object from a block of silex using replicas of tools from the prehistoric period. As a result of this experiment, she was able to determine that it had been shaped by cutting off slices, or slivers. According to archaeologists, this technique is a feature of one specific species of humans, which is not Homo sapiens.
This kind of stone knapping is called the Levallois technique, and it's characteristic of the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals were those who invented it.
Neanderthals. A lineage that disappeared off the face of the earth more than 30,000 years ago. This human species came before our Homo sapien ancestors. For nearly 300,000 years, the Neanderthals occupied all of Eurasia. They were nomadic, which meant they were constantly moving around to find food. The scientists are convinced that one of these groups stopped at La Roche Cotard for a while. A group of Neanderthal nomads probably set up a hunting camp in the strategic location overlooking Loire Valley, where the skilled hunters could track the herds of bison that abounded in this region at the time. But does that mean it may have been Neanderthals who carved these motifs into the cave walls? That's what the evidence seems to point to so far.
For us, as prehistorians, it's really powerful, because until now, no one could have imagined that the Neanderthals might have been capable of such symbolic illustrations. You have to remember that, for a long time, we thought the Neanderthals had a much lower cognitive capacity than our ancestors, the Homo sapiens, that they were a sort of sub-man or half-monkey, or something kind of halfway between the two.
And suddenly, we have graphics on a cave wall that might have been done by Neanderthals. We have to investigate. Because we don't know of any shelters or caves decorated with Neanderthal motifs in France. At least not so far. And not in Spain, Italy, or the rest of Eurasia either. So, this was incredible.
These elements could change our fundamental understanding of Neanderthals. But first, we must be sure they're definitely the ones who could have made these traces. Therefore, the traces must be dated. The results of the OSL will be crucial. This operation takes place a few weeks after the samples were taken, some 30 kilometers from Copenhagen, in this former nuclear research center. It's now home to the largest dating lab in Europe. Guillaume Guérin has traveled here to attend the testing.
Hey there.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Well, welcome. So you had a
Oh, thanks. Yes,
Yeah,
very good.
awesome.
Are the samples ready?
Yeah, they're ready.
Okay, so we can go and make some slices, get some minerals out of there,
Yeah.
and see what we have.
Yes, let's do that.
Perfect.
The multi-step process will take place in a special wing dedicated to OSL dating. The scientists must work in near complete darkness so as not to contaminate the samples. The only light source is a weak yellow lamp.
So you can see the samples sitting in there. I have actually started this morning, and this slicing.
Yes.
There's a wire here that actually it cuts in the rock. So it's like cutting in butter.
You know the resolution, like how thick the slices are?
Yeah, usually I can make them 0.7 millimeter.
0.7?
Yeah.
Wow. So really high resolution.
Yeah.
They must retrieve the minerals from deep inside the sample.
The energy we're trying to measure will be released as soon as it is exposed to light. So we only want it to be exposed to light inside our instrument because then we can measure the energy coming out.
Once the rock has been cut into slices, those slices will be dissolved to try to collect the grains of feldspar.
As you see, the slices fall apart, they're going into veins. So I only take out the acids now. So here I have to be careful not to pull out my grains. So I do it slowly, so the grain stays. Yeah, that's it. So the grains stay at the bottom.
The information we're looking for is found inside these few tiny grains we extracted from the larger limestone matrix.
Thanks to these grains of feldspar, Guillaume Guérin should finally know the date the cave was sealed off. It's time for the last step. Placing the grains in this luminescence reader. Inside, they're stimulated by light pulses that should release the information they contain.
The important thing is when it goes like this. Oh, I actually see it. It's a really good one.
The result is actually
Right. So older than
expected, yes.
Okay.
Ta-da!
And that's what it is.
Yeah, that's what it is.
We were surprised to see that the samples dated back to around 60,000 years ago. Not only did that confirm that the traces were made in the prehistoric period, but also it was well before the Homo Sapiens started making their way to Europe, which was only around 45,000 or 50,000 years ago. So if these traces were made at that point in time, they must have been made by Neanderthals. They were the only ones there, so it must have been them who got into the cave and made these marks on the walls. What that means is that Roche Cotard is the oldest known decorated cave in the world today. This is huge.
The prehistorians finally have the proof they were looking for. These engravings were indeed made by Neanderthals. But at this point in the investigation, the researchers must now figure out what status these traces should be given. Should they be considered as actual works of art?
The question is whether these can be considered as art. They're symbolic, that's for sure. But can they truly be compared to the representational frescoes done by Homo Sapiens, our ancestors, tens of thousands of years later in Chauvet or Lascaux?
Let's be clear, these traces aren't representational. They're not on the same level as those found in Chauvet, but nonetheless, they were clearly done intentionally. They weren't accidental, they were created with intent.
The most important example is the famous triangular panel covered entirely with parallel lines. The triangular drawing, and most probably the other drawings as well, wasn't done in a hurry, but was thought out in advance before it started to be put on the wall. These graphics depict fairly abstract things, which throws us for a bit of a loop, because we've never studied anything like them before. They're not figurative. There's nothing representational about them. So, are they a form of abstract art, or had they not come up yet with the concept of figurative art at that point in time? Perhaps figurative art hadn't yet been conceived by these ancient populations. That's entirely possible. But when everything's said and done, of course, it's a kind of human art. It's the early stages. It's not realistic, and it may be harder to understand than other forms, but in my opinion, there's no reason to exclude it from the overall idea of human art.
In that case, can our ancestors, the Homo sapiens, truly be considered as the first artists in humanity? Or might it be time to revisit that paradigm, which is taught in all the history books? Because what these traces seem to show is that tens of thousands of years before the Homo sapiens, Neanderthals were already making art on cave walls. After such an important discovery, the team of researchers present their findings in a major scientific journal. The announcement of their article's publication is the ultimate validation.
It's hugely satisfying to see the result of all of our efforts and the hard work of so many people, all experts in their own fields. It's clearly a big accomplishment. Publishing an article, especially this one, in a major journal with such impressive results is always a big source of joy.
I've known about this site for more than 40 years, but 40 years ago, it would have been totally impossible for me to suggest, let alone to experts. The fact that these digital traces could only have been made by Neanderthals. They would have thought I was crazy back then.
It would seem that the Neanderthals did indeed produce abstract art. But a new element in the investigation could lead to yet another surprising discovery. The first time Jean-Claude Marquet came here almost 50 years ago, he discovered a very strange object. He didn't know what to think of it at the time. Today, he has decided to take it out of his archives, because in light of his recent discoveries in the cave, it may prove to be crucial.
I'm going to wear gloves because this object is unique. So it's very precious. It was found here in the late 70s, when I first came here. After making a few observations inside the cave, my plan was to do a survey in front of the entrance to the cave. We dug down a few layers, but found nothing of archaeological interest at all. No wildlife, no arrowheads, nothing. And then, at a depth of 1.8 meters, we found this object. After writing down its location, we removed it and took a very close look at it, and we were amazed. What's surprising is that this object presents what looks like an image of a face.
Jean-Claude Marquet noted one thing in particular: a bone that had been slipped inside this block of flint, which seems to form eyes.
Here it is, the enigmatic object. Until now, objects made by Neanderthals have been deemed non-figurative. But here, I believe we can see a face. I really do.
Might the Neanderthals have created figurative works after all? It's such a burning question that Jean-Claude Marquet once again called on the Danish physicist and OSL dating experts for their assistance.
You go.
I go.
They took a core sample of the archaeological layers where the object was found. Their findings leave no room for doubt. This object is at least 60,000 years old, just like the traces in the cave. So it could indeed have been made by Neanderthals. But in order to be sure, they must confirm that this object, a sort of mask, was made intentionally and not created by chance. Jean-Claude Marquet asked traceologist Dorota Wojciech to study it. She was able to find some essential clues. All around the block of flint, she identified what traceologists call points of impact, which is to say, proof that the object was carved.
You can see them here. There are at least 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here you can see some marks too. So there are 10 or 12 at least, if not more. So I don't think it's coincidental. The block of stone wasn't originally shaped like this. It was definitely altered. I can see eyes, a nose, and a forehead. There's no doubt about it. The shape resembles a mask, a face, something familiar.
Dorota Wojciech also believes there is another argument in favor of this hypothesis. She has been able to determine that the bone that seems to form the eyes was fixed in place intentionally using small pieces of flint.
We have these small stones that were put inside to keep it from moving, and it still hasn't moved to this day. To me, that makes it look intentional, not only the shaping of this block into something identifiable, but also this piece of bone that was put into place. I think it's very telling.
It seems as though this object is indeed a sculpture, created from a block of flint that Neanderthals carved, modified, and shaped with the clear intention of turning it into a human face. Dorota Wojciech knows how groundbreaking this discovery is. Is it possible that Neanderthals were not only capable of creating abstract art, but also paved the way for figurative art? For now, this hypothesis is kept undercover. But Jean-Claude Marquet and Dorota Wojciech are preparing to share it with the scientific community.
Don't be nervous, okay?
No, it'll be fine.
Every summer, a prestigious conference brings together Europe's top prehistorians. This year, it's taking place at the University of Budapest. There will be a special session dedicated to the mass found at La Roche Cotard.
Are you ready?
Yes.
This is a big moment for Dorota Wojciech and Jean-Claude Marquet. More than 30 of the leading experts in prehistoric art have traveled to be here, including Italian scholar Marco Perezzani from the University of Ferrara and Serbian professor Ana Majskić from the University of Belgrade.
I didn't really expect that many people to show up. Participants come a little bit from everywhere. I mean, we had participants even from Australia.
Jean-Claude Marquet might be in the audience. Do you want to present something or do you want to comment?
Come with me.
Okay.
I was a little nervous because I had no idea how the session would go. I didn't know what the atmosphere would be like. I also think there were a few people in the room who were opposed to the idea that Neanderthals could have produced art. As a result, I clearly wasn't feeling that confident.
It has been discovered 40 years ago, not in the cave, in front of the cave, in a Mousterian level.
For nearly 2 hours, Dorota Wojciech and Jean-Claude Marquet present their discovery, defend it,
In archaeology, especially here, we have done this.
and try to answer all the questions.
Is it a natural engraving or is it made by people?
They try to convince the experts that this object was indeed a face sculpted by Neanderthals.
What I've seen yesterday was impressive. It resembles, let's say, a human face, so it's kind of anthropomorphic.
At the end of the session, many people came up to see the mask up close. It was a cast, of course, not the original, but they wanted to pick it up and look at the front, the back, etc. Marco Perezzani was very, very intrigued.
Personally, I don't think there's any doubt about it. This is a very creative representation. It's very simple, but it presents the identifying traits of a face. Eyes and a nose. The mouth is missing. The Neanderthals didn't have much of a chin, it's true, but it also has a large supraorbital torus, which could correspond to the faces of Neanderthals.
Often in our field, any evidence that might in fact indicate complex cognition in Neanderthal was tended to be, so to say, explained through cultural influence by Homo sapiens. So what is really interesting about this site is that there is a proof that there was no contact with Homo sapiens, so you cannot resort back to this acculturation hypothesis to explain the discovered phenomena.
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting.
This is a victory for Jean-Claude Marquet. What started as a simple intuition when he first discovered this object 50 years ago seems to have finally been accepted by his peers.
The fact that I was given this chance to present the mask during the round table today was obviously very emotional for me. Of course.
Yes, it was very moving, especially because I'm here with Jean-Claude. I know this is the discovery of a lifetime for him. It's very important. I thought the people in attendance looked very interested. They were very moved, and they seemed to be in agreement with us.
Our concept and idea of art will have to change. It's exactly this. I mean, it's, in a way, simply the way the science works, simply because any science is not a closed dogmatic system, but it has to be open for new discoveries.
This cave in the Touraine region just made its way into the history books. That simple cave will change how we think about art. Because thanks to the traces on the walls, the mask, and the perseverance of all these researchers, everything seems to point to the Neanderthals as the originators of the most beautiful part of humanity.